Alright, all you glorious gamers out there, welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com, that's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. You're an absolute legend to us. Alright, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis?
Going very well, Mark. Good to see you as ever. How are you getting on?
Not too bad. Straight into it, Lewis. We've got a lot to cover this week. No mucking about. What have you been playing?
Well, Mark, I haven't been playing very much at all this week, actually. Between some work stuff that's been eating up my time, the football, obviously, commiserations to our friends in the south. So I've not been playing a great deal, to be honest, but I have been playing a little mobile game this week called Lego Builder's Journey, Mark.
Yes.
Which has just come to Switch and to PC as well, but I've been playing it on Apple Arcade. I think it's been on iOS for a year or so, but I think it's just been ported in the last few weeks to the other platforms. And honestly, this is just an extremely chill, very simple but very beautiful little puzzle game, which has a sort of Monument Valley feel about it. If you've ever played that game, it's just like a slightly isometric view down on a kind of puzzle board, essentially, and all you're ever doing is kind of making little Lego pathways for your character from sort of one point to another. But it does have a story. It's got this kind of like what I am reading into as a bit of a father-son narrative about playing together when the boy is young, and then the father keeps getting dragged off to work, and so the boy enters his own kind of like imagination, and off he goes exploring, and probably some not so nice stuff is going to happen within all that. But honestly, man, it is just about clicking a screen and turning your brain off, and it is very visually pleasing to look at. It's got a really nice score as well. So that's kind of all I've been doing. It's just been one of those weeks where I've needed a little bit of a gaming break, I think. I'm kind of waiting on some new games to come that I want to start, so I didn't want to start anything too meaty this week. So that's kind of what I've been up to.
Nice one, man. I have to say that I did not know Lego Builder's Journey existed until 10 minutes before we started recording this podcast, Lewis. I went on YouTube immediately, obviously, just to see what the gameplay was like. My God, it looks beautiful.
It really
for
does.
For a Lego game. Oh my God, it was absolutely stunning. And it does, you're absolutely right, Lewis, it does just look like Lego Monument Valley, and that is no bad thing at all, frankly. No bad thing at all. And you know what? Having a bit of a break after a long gaming experience, and I know that RE Village wasn't actually that long a game, but it did take you a while to get through it, man. It all just builds and builds and builds and builds, you know what I mean? And taking a little break, I think, particularly because I know you've been busy with work, I know you've been busy watching the football, frankly. It's no bad thing. A bit of low intensity game, and it's good for us all. I genuinely believe that.
Absolutely, yeah. Low intensity is the thing, man. I think I need a bit more of that generally in my gaming. But yeah, I would say anyone, particularly if you've got Apple Arcades, check it out. And what have you been playing, Mark?
Well, Lewis, I finished Final Fantasy VII Intergrade. This is the DLC for the Final Fantasy VII remake. And I have to say, overall, that was pretty good. It was pretty good.
Nice,
I'm very
good.
glad that I played it. Combat-wise, absolutely excellent. The combat system is absolutely great. It's such a fantastic hybrid of the sort of action RPG, Devil May Cry style, and still paying homage to the original Final Fantasy VII menu-driven combat. Is just such a fantastic meshing of the two, you know? Story-wise, it was fine, honestly. It started off pretty strong. I feel that it faded a bit, to be honest. Sonon, your companion character throughout, is a bit personality-less, to be completely honest with you. But we didn't have a huge amount of game to get to know him, I suppose. I think the whole thing was 7 hours, of which he was in about 4, I would say. And I have to say, and spoiler alert here, like if you genuinely don't want spoilers for Final Fantasy VII Intergrade, maybe just skip ahead a few minutes or whatever, but spoiler alert, this guy who was never in the original Final Fantasy VII series dies at the end, and they try to give him a very, like a hero's death at the end, but the narrative he didn't really deserve that, you know what I mean? We just didn't really know him enough to feel the weight that they were trying to give that moment, you know what I mean? Also, the final boss only showed up about 10 minutes before the end of the game, and he is a character in the Dirge of Cerberus, which is a Final Fantasy VII spin-off, and I think that him and his brother Vice, who also appears in Intergrade, were also in Crisis Core as well, very briefly, but I think they're more known for being in Dirge of Cerberus. And I think that showing the two of them was supposed to be like a bit of a wow moment, but I don't know if enough people played that game, and I certainly don't know if enough people liked that game for that to be a real wow moment. And I hadn't played either of those games, so I saw these two mad, very Japanese-looking, wild-haired characters appear on screen, and I was like, who are these guys? And I had to Google it, obviously. So that moment sort of lacked weight, and the fact that they were only in it for like the last 10 minutes, then one of them was the final boss, it was a bit sort of like, that could have been done better, couldn't it have? Let's be honest. Some of the combat as well became slightly formulaic. It felt a bit wave based at times, and that sort of happened like more than once in what is quite a short run. Do you know what I mean? I'm making this sound terrible, by the way. I really enjoyed playing this. It was absolutely worth the money. The Fort Condor minigame within the DLC that I was talking about last time, really enjoyed that. Still really enjoyed that. That was great. I would happily play a Apple Arcade game that was just that, frankly.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, I think in story it lacked a little bit compared to like the canon Final Fantasy VII. But in terms of gameplay, I was just so happy to be back there and playing in that system again. Like the moment to moment, like when you're actually fighting stuff, it's just fucking great. It's fantastic. It really is so good.
Nice one, yeah. I'm glad you gave it the time, particularly given how much of a fan of both the original and the original remake that you were. Is this essentially just setting up Yuffie's introduction to the next part, essentially? Is that what's going on here?
I mean, I would have thought so. I would think that in the next game, the next part of the Final Fantasy VII remake, the mainline story, they would run into Yuffie. I would be shocked if that didn't happen, to be honest with you. The way that you find Yuffie in the original is a bit sort of weird in the way that happens, but I imagine they'll do something different for the remake where it's just a sort of chance encounter. It'd be great if you got to play as her again, to be honest with you, because she was great. She was really good. She was really fun to play as. I really liked her weapon system and whatever. Like, it was really cool. I really enjoyed that specifically. Like, she was such a great character, actually, to play as, which I think really made the DLC, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, I would thought that this means that her introduction is inevitable in the next part of the remake,
You surely don't build her character and the fighting mechanics that she's got and stuff and then not use them again, so I would think that she's a shoo-in, surely, to be part of your party in the next game.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, does she just appear, or does she appear and you can play as her? These are two very different things for Final Fantasy VII Remake specifically. But yeah, I would have thought and I would hope that you could play as Yuffie in the next one, because, yeah, again, she was great. She was really, really good, and I would happily play as her again, 100%. Anyway, Lewis, I think it's time for the news. All right, Lewis, news item number 1. Ubisoft is planning an Assassin's Creed service game codenamed Assassin's Creed Infinity. This news was broken by Jason Schreier over at Bloomberg, but has subsequently been confirmed by Ubisoft. Apparently, rather than being set in one location, like Greece or Egypt or whatever, there will be multiple settings within the game with room to grow even bigger. However, Jason Schreier has acknowledged that the game has scant details as yet because I think it's very early in development, and that the game is also a long way out because of that. Ubisoft themselves have stated that the project will be a joint effort between Ubisoft Montreal and Ubisoft Quebec, which means that this is a pretty big project, Lewis. Pretty big project, it looks like. And I think that raises a lot of interesting questions, but I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention the ongoing allegations of harassment and toxic behaviour and sexual misconduct at Ubisoft. This has been going on for what feels like a long time now, Lewis, and Ubisoft keep on telling us that they are investigating, but in reality, very little seems to actually be happening, and it has been confirmed that some of the accused remain in senior positions at the company. And in fact, last month, French union Solidaris Informatique said 3 managers in Montreal had been accused of harassment and toxic behaviour, which was subsequently reported to Human Resources without, quotes, anything being done. So, obviously, Lewis, I think I speak for the both of us when I say absolutely fuck these people who perpetuate a toxic culture, who harass their employees sexually or otherwise. Ubisoft clearly has an issue here, and it's something that they don't seem all that bothered to change, which is really the frustrating part of this. Do you know what I mean? It's clear that they have a problem, and they really don't appear to be doing very much to do anything about it.
Yeah, absolutely agree, Mark. Glad that you raised that here. I think it's really important not to get carried away by the story about the game itself and acknowledge that there are still these really critical and horrible issues going on within the company. So yeah, get them to fuck, basically.
Get them to fuck indeed. But Lewis, we are here to talk about the games. Now, this is the second big gaming franchise in 2 weeks after GTA 6, which we were talking about last week, and the rumours are that they are going in a very similar direction with this service model. I suppose how I've been thinking about this is, do we think this Assassin's Creed Infinity is going to be like Final Fantasy XIV? Is it going to be a situation like that where this will be its own thing and the mainline games will continue? So are we going to have Assassin's Creed Infinity and the mainline games go on, or is this just what Assassin's Creed's going to be now?
I think that's an absolutely fascinating question, Mark, which I hadn't ever really considered when this topic came up. I guess because my hunch is that this is just the future of Assassin's Creed. If you look at the teams involved, if you look at kind of what Assassin's Creed has become over the years, you can sort of see how it could play out in this way, you know, with maybe one enormous map that keeps being added to, or using the Animus within Assassin's Creed. Obviously, you could have a situation where you jump in and out of different maps, essentially smaller maps.
I strongly suspect that will be what is actually happening narratively.
Yeah, and that could work quite well. So if you do that, then you don't necessarily need external games to continue. You don't need anything outside of this platform. If we start to see Assassin's Creed Infinity as kind of like the launcher, and then you just pay for whatever content you want within that, I don't see that they will necessarily continue the games as we understand them currently outside of that. You know, maybe you could still buy like the Valhalla pack, so to speak, and you could play that, but you don't have access to anything else. But I suspect that it will become, if this is all true and if it works, and obviously it's a long time away probably, but I think this will be the core of it. They might do other things within the Assassin's Creed universe. You know, there's bound to be more spin-off movies and TV shows and all that stuff, and board games and mobile games and blah 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 blah. So it's not to say that this alone is Assassin's Creed, but yeah, if you're asking me, do the mainline games continue in that Final Fantasy vein, I doubt it, honestly. If you asked me that about Final Fantasy, if Final Fantasy didn't already exist like that, I would have said no as well. So
no, I mean, I completely get that, to be honest with you. I think things like Final Fantasy XIV and The Elder Scrolls Online, as well as another one that comes to mind, are sort of old hat now. It seems as though the movement here is towards just being online, being in a world that can be updated, that can be changed on a whim, and having your sort of Fortnite model in that capacity. Do you know what I mean? Obviously very, very different games, but in terms of the world and what they're trying to do, basically creating a platform for the game as well as the content for the game. Do you know what I mean? So the content is within this platform of Assassin's Creed Infinity, you know. Like you said, this is very early in development. It'll probably be a while before we get any concrete details on this, but again, Ubisoft have confirmed that this is a thing and this is happening, which, to be honest with you, is in line as well with what Ubisoft has been doing with a lot of their content and the way that they've been talking about trying to move away from relying so heavily on AAA games, which just immediately made, I think, everyone think, oh well, they're going to be moving into services. And if you notice, a lot of the games that they've been bringing out recently are very much in that line as well. This really shouldn't come as a surprise, I suppose. I know that it was getting a lot of pushback, but I would wait on seeing this one, because this actually could be good for the series, I think, anyway. Do you know what I mean? Rather than having all these, well, not annual releases anymore, but every 2-year releases, you could just be on a platform and having like Destiny-esque content drops every now and again. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not sure that people wouldn't actually prefer that when they're in it, whereas right now, the resistance to change is always quite mighty, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think it's important to mention there as well that Jason Schreier did come out and clear up that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going multiplayer, which I think is what a lot of people assumed the rumour before Ubisoft confirmed it would mean. Like, that's obviously what we associate live service with to quite a high degree. And so he made it clear that that's not necessarily what he was reporting. And I kind of agree. I'm interested to see at least what their plans are for this, what the model could be, because you are already, you know, you're buying Valhalla and then you're buying the Druids pack and you're getting extra content drops, and, you know, Odyssey had a really long tail. And I mean, if you imagine this a bit like just Origins, Odyssey and Valhalla all plugged together, and you can have maybe one character that goes through them all, or one kind of experience level that transfers between them all, like if it's kind of that sort of thing and you can just hop between levels through the Animus, I don't think that is necessarily such a bad thing, but we wait and see.
We wait and see, Lewis, we wait and see, but yeah, hold your horses on Condemnation, I would say. Alright, Lewis, news item number 2. PlayStation had a state of play this week. It was billed as an update on indie games and a deep dive into Deathloop, although we did also get details of Death Stranding Director's Cut, but honestly, the whole thing was a little bit underwhelming. We'll do a very quick recap here, Lewis. First off, they started with Moss Book 2, which is a VR game, which I'm very glad exists, and Moss was one of the early PSVR games that was a sort of darling in that community, you know. Although, with all the will in the world, I didn't think the trailer made this game look all that great.
Nope.
Having said that, I'm very glad that it exists. I'm very glad it's there for PSVR players. After that was Arcadegeddon. I've now watched the trailer for this twice, and I'm not entirely sure what this game is, Lewis. It is a multiplayer shooter of some kind, but it's nothing that is any interest of me, and honestly, it didn't look that great, but it is coming in early 2022. I hope that the game plays better than it looks, I will say that much. Then after that was Tribes of Midgar. Again, this is very much something that's not for me personally, I do have to say, and once again, I didn't think it looked particularly good. It looked to me very much like MMO Vikings, but apparently it's actually a survival game. I read on their Steam description, although the trailer did not give me those vibes in the slightest. Regardless, that is coming on the 27th of July, so not far away at all. After that was Fist, Forged and Firetorch. This game did look absolutely fucking great, and every time I see this game, I think that it looks absolutely fucking great. This is a Metroidvania where you play as a rabbit with a robot arm. Yes, that's a real thing. But the action looks absolutely incredible, and graphically looks absolutely incredible as well for a game of this scope. I just think that every time I see it, it just looks so impressive, and I cannot wait to get my hands on it, and it's coming September the 7th. After that was Hunter's Arena. This is basically a melee/action fighting game battle royale type thing, which I actually think is quite interesting in concept. It'll be very interesting to see how that lands. It's coming on August the 3rd, and it will release on PS Plus, which means that there should be an audience there at least to give the game a try when it launches, you know. After that, Lewis, Sifu, this a bit of a darling among PlayStation fans, I do have to say. We got to see a bit more gameplay, and we got to see really how the mechanics work, where if you die, then you respawn instantly, but your character is aged, which again is a really interesting concept within a roguelike game. I'm sort of not as into this game as other people are. It's just not grabbing me in that same way. I know that you quite like it, Lewis. The game is actually slightly delayed. It was supposed to be coming this year, but it's been delayed to early 2022. But I never really had a firm release date, so it doesn't really feel like that big a deal. Do you know what I mean? You were more interested in this, Lewis.
Yeah, it caught my fancy the last time we saw it. I don't really think it added anything here, to be honest. It does feel like it was included only really to announce the delay, but in the context of showing a trailer, you know, to keep people happy. To me, it just looks like a pretty interesting sort of fighting game style roguelike, quite stylish looking, in that kind of kung fu martial arts vein. I'm intrigued. I want to see more, but we now have to wait another little bit, so we'll see.
Fair enough. After that, Lewis, was Jet the Far Shore, and we actually got quite a long look at this game, to be completely honest with you. This is the game where you seem to be exploring a planet on a Wipeout-esque ship, and the game very much looks like Journey meets No Man's Sky meets Wipeout, I guess. On paper, I think that I should be pretty interested in this game, but again, I'm kind of not. It doesn't actually look as if you do a hell of a lot in the game. Again, to be completely honest with you, and in my opinion, that trailer made that game look dull as hell. I'll be totally honest with you, man. It is coming later this year, Lewis. I know that you're more interested than me.
Well, I'm pretty similar, I've got to say. I have been excited about this since we first saw it, and I watched that whole trailer and kind of thought at the end, I still don't really know what this game actually is, and it doesn't look like a heap of fun. It does look like low intensity gaming, as we were talking about at the top of the show, but...
And look, there's a place for that, Lewis. There's a place for that, but...
it just feels like it could be more than that, could be more exciting than that.
Well, there you go. I think I would agree with that quite a lot, to be honest with you. After that is Lost Judgment, and I think this is the first time we got to see a real look at this game, or the first time I got a real look at this game, certainly. This is a sequel to Judgment 2018, which in and of itself is a spin-off of the Yakuza series. I think it is awesome, again, that this game exists. It's a very cool spin-off of a big series, do you know what I mean? Taking it in a sort of slightly different direction, which I like a lot. I'm just not that into Yakuza games. I know that there's diehard Yakuza fans out there that have just went, what? And their head has exploded when I've said that. It's just not for me. It's just not for me, but I'm glad that this game exists. I'm glad that this game exists for you, and it's coming on September the 24th. After that was Death Stranding Director's Cut, but we're going to come back to that, Lewis. We're going to come back to that. Just put a wee pin in that for now. Finally, Lewis, was Deathloop. It continues to look great, to be honest with you. This game continues to look very, very cool. The pulpy vibe is singing to me a lot. However, I just want this game to come out now. I feel as if I've seen this game to death a little bit. There were parts of that footage as well that were shown off in that trailer that I was like, we have absolutely, categorically seen this before. Like, I've seen large swathes of that footage before. The game is coming on September the 24th, and quite frankly, it can't come soon enough because the game looks fantastic.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I do think you're right that the trailer felt pretty samey to what we've seen before, and I'm not sure that they do have too much more to tell us about the game, but I am very interested in this. I think it looks really good fun. Yeah, definitely, man. Totally agree on that front. But Lewis, I think we can also agree that this wasn't a great PlayStation State of Play. Let's be honest with ourselves here. My question to you is, how do you think that this movement to a Nintendo Direct style format of announcements is going? Not even specifically for PlayStation, because obviously Ubisoft, Square, like they're all doing this now. There's a huge jumping on the bandwagon, frankly, from when Nintendo was doing really well with their Directs, and everyone thought, oh, that's a good idea, let's copy that, you know? But when Nintendo were doing it right at the start of the Switch launch, it felt as if Nintendo were announcing an absolute banger every single time they'd done one of these Directs, you know? But even Nintendo seems to be waning under the strain of this format because, one, you set up your audience for multiple big gaming announcements per year, and two, when you do not reach those expectations on every single announcement, which you won't, you are inevitably setting them up for disappointment multiple times a year. I don't know that we can sustain this, frankly. It's sort of where I'm coming from. I think it's quite a mixed and complicated thing because basically overall I think the move to this model does work and works in the favour of the publishers who can sing about their games at the right moments and put them in front of people and all that, control their own marketing and not be completely reliant on having the big E3 showcase and then hoping to get some headlines at the Game Awards maybe or one of the other big shows. But yeah, the other lesson that Nintendo learned after an absolutely banger first couple of years of the Switch, where they could have regular directs because they had game after game after game after game after game to announce and to get people hyped by, but they stopped that cycle. Nintendo broke their own thing of having them as regularly that you could, you know, set your watch to, that you knew exactly when the next one was going to be coming or roughly when it'd be coming, and then Nintendo went ages without doing one. And I think that is kind of the key. Only do one of these things when you actually have stuff to talk about, and enough stuff. This one, to me, Mark, this State of Play was basically the PlayStation blog in video form. Like, it was that level of content apart from Deathloop and the Death Stranding Director's Cut, really. It was the kind of stuff that you'd expect them to go like, today's Indie Day on the PlayStation blog and here's 5 trailers. And I just don't think they need to always put that in a video, and particularly weeks after E3, I think it was the wrong time for this, basically.
Yeah, well, in terms of E3, yeah, I think that they've come out looking quite weak after a lot of, particularly Xbox and Nintendo, looked very good at E3, do you know what I mean? However, I think what you've said there is absolutely bang on. I would say, take the Death Stranding Director's Cut announcement out of this. Let Kojima do his own thing with that. I don't even know why you're bothering with that. Let Kojima do his stuff with that. We did not need to see Deathloop again here. We just didn't. Why not take the two of those things out and then rebrand this whole thing as an indies presentation? Look at us spotlighting indie games over here, and particularly after the month PlayStation's had, where indie developers have been at their throats because of their lack of support, you know, how good that would have looked for them. But instead they put out this sort of lackluster in-between thing where we got a wee bit of Deathloop, and Deathloop looks great. I'm not having a go at Deathloop, by the way. Deathloop looks fantastic. I've seen enough of it. Like, it's fine. You don't need to show me another trailer for the 20th time, you know. Let Kojima do his own thing with the Death Stranding Director's Cut announcement. Yeah, just make this an indies thing, and it would have been so much better as well. Like, we have different expectations for something like that as well, you know. I don't know. I don't think that this Nintendo Direct style is working quite as well as people think that it is or want it to. Do you know what I mean? I am playing devil's advocate a little bit there. I do think that this format basically is the future, but there's still some figuring out of the formula, you know? Absolutely, on that point, yeah, absolutely. There's still some figuring out to be done. And it's just about timing and making the right decisions and not just doing one because you think that you ought to. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. All right, Lewis, news item number 3, and coming back to Kojima and the Death Stranding Director's Cut announcement, we got a nice long look at some gameplay from the Director's Cut, and we now know that the game will be releasing on September the 14th, so not far away at all. The Director's Cut will include new story missions, new combat mechanics, a firing range mode, a racing mode, new weapons, new equipment, DualSense support, 60 FPS performance mode with upscaled 4K, and a native 4K fidelity mode with ultra-wide and HDR support. Kojima has also confirmed that data from the PS4 version will carry on to the PS5, and you can upgrade any PS4 copy of the game to the PS5 Director's Cut for $10. There is no UK or EU pricing as of this recording. However, Lewis, Kojima took to Twitter to say that the Death Stranding Director's Cut isn't a Director's Cut at all, and completely validates Lewis Camley's position since the game was announced that this in fact is not a Director's Cut and that is a dumb name. Lewis, would you like to read Kojima's tweets?
Certainly, Mike. He tweeted, "A director's cut in a movie is an additional edit to a shortened version that was either released reluctantly because the director did not have the right to edit it, or because the running time had to be shortened. In the game, it is not what was cut, but what was additionally produced that was included. Director's Plus? So in my opinion, I don't like to call it Director's Cut."
Amazing. Keeping in mind that that's a man whose first language is not English, but Director's Plus instead of Director's Cut is tremendous. I absolutely love that so much. On the subject of Director's Cuts, Lewis, there have been rumours this week that Bloodborne would be getting a quote-unquote Hunter's Edition. There were also rumours last month that we might be getting a remaster of Bloodborne as well. But the latest does seem to be more in line with what PlayStation are doing with these director's cuts. The leak also says that Bloodborne would be getting 4K 60 FPS support, new weapons, expanded areas of the map, and crucially a PC port, which makes a lot of sense because Bloodborne was just announced as the most played PS Now game on PC. And why wouldn't it be? That entire community is there. Now, please take those rumours with an absolutely, and I cannot stress this enough, a colossal grain of salt. While the remaster rumour does come from a leaker that was right about Final Fantasy VII Origins, the Hunter's Edition Director's Cut rumour does come from 4chan. So, I mean, seriously take that with a grain of salt. Although, granted, it has apparently come from someone who was right about Bloodborne in the past. So, I don't know. I'm always very sceptical about rumours at the best of times, but these rumours in particular are very, very sceptical. But Lewis, validation from Hideo Kojima himself on your position on the director's cuts. What do you make of all this in general? And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if that Bloodborne thing felt shoehorned in so that Mark could talk about it, you are correct.
Always got to get your Bloodborne in. Overall, like starting with Death Stranding Director's Cut itself, I think that the additions to this look really interesting. More story missions, some new areas by the sounds of it, or at least kind of fleshed out parts of the existing game world. The amazing cargo catapult and cargo buddy.
That looked incredible. That was so good.
And plus, you know, some enhanced combat stuff. And we also, in the initial announcement of the Director's Cut, we did get that weird kind of Metal Gear style nod towards some kind of stealthy section, some indoor sections with more enemies. It looks to me like they've improved the two things that, you know, Death Stranding had not particularly great combat. They've improved that, and its core was the moving of stuff around and the traversal particularly, and it looks like they've enhanced both of those things. So I'm really keen on it. I think I'll be playing this when it drops.
Really? That's exactly what I was going to ask you, Liz. I was wondering if you were going to go back to it for this.
Yeah, I think I really will, yeah. Particularly if the new content, the new story content is actually worth checking out. If it's just graphical enhancements and stuff, possibly not. But yeah, just in terms of the Director's Cut name itself, I think it's incredibly stupid, to be honest. I think as he's quite tactfully put it here, obviously he can't really cross whatever Sony have told him to call it, but it doesn't make any sense. It's not a Director's Cut at all. The video that Kojima Productions put out with one of their other studio leads immediately after the State of Play, where he was kind of explaining what had been added and answering some Twitter questions from fans, made it very clear that this was not a Director's Cut at all. It was just new content. This is what we used to refer to as an expanded edition or a Game of the Year edition.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just new content, and I think it's a slightly grubby way of Sony trying to tempt people to buy additional content. Yeah, a lot of people are, you know, reasonably hesitant about DLC. It doesn't often sell super well, but you call it Director's Cut and you make it sound like something that Kojima couldn't get into the original is now here. Same with Ghost of Tsushima. I think it's borrowing the terminology of film as if game needs that, and gaming doesn't need that. Gaming can have its own terminology, it can have its own lexicon. Overall, the whole idea doesn't particularly bother me. I just get really wound up by the idea that they've done it this way, that they couldn't have just called this Death Stranding expanded or PS5 edition or whatever it is, just like borrowing something else, trying to add something to it in the title that it's not really earned. I just think it's a little bit greasy. Yeah,
to be honest with you, I completely agree with you, and so does Hideo Kojima, so that must feel pretty good.
Me and him are tight, you know.
Anyway, Lewis, news item number PS4. EA have unveiled the new FIFA 2022 this week, and their big thing seems to be what they're calling hypermotion, which uses machine learning to improve how players move on the pitch, it seems. EA have made this statement regarding hypermotion and machine learning.
XN suits record every touch, tackle, sprint and duel from all 22 players playing at high intensity for the first time ever, capturing data that powers over 4,000 new animations in FIFA 22 to raise the footballing intensity, responsiveness and physicality of every player in the game. And on machine learning, they've added, a cutting-edge proprietary machine learning algorithm learns from over 8.7 million frames of advanced match capture, then writes new animations in real time to create organic football realism across a variety of interactions on the pitch.
So basically what they've done is they've put some professional footballers in daft suits and made them play a game of football, and they've recorded all the motion. Now, I'm sort of trivialising that, but that is actually pretty cool, and I do think that sounds cool, and the fact that they're using machine learning to achieve that, you know what I mean, I think is just fantastic, and I'll be genuinely interested to see how that actually plays out in the game. But to be honest with you, Lewis, the bare bones of this, it just looks like another FIFA game, doesn't it? Let's be totally honest here. In typical EA fashion as well, this announcement did not come without controversy, and this is largely because the PC version of the game will not have these features and will effectively be the PS4/Xbox One version of the game that you're getting on PC. This is something that is only reserved for the PS5, the Series X, and, unbelievably, Stadia. So you can play on your PC on Stadia and have these features, but the version you download from Steam or EA Play or whatever will not have that, which is absolutely insanity. I completely understand that the last gen consoles might not be able to handle this sort of feature. Completely understandable, no problems here. But PC? What is that about? That seems like a totally bizarre decision. And this is apparently something that happened with FIFA 21 as well. It was effectively the last gen version of the game, or it wasn't as updated a version of the game as they had on console. The only reason I can think of that is that maybe not enough people play it on PC to merit the upgrades, but that just doesn't compute in my head, particularly when you're putting on Stadia, for fuck's sake. You know what I mean? More people are playing this on standard PC hardware through standard launchers than are fucking going to play it on Stadia, hands down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it definitely does seem like a strange oversight. Maybe they don't have a lot of players there, or maybe they're trying to drive people towards the consoles, but it is pretty bizarre. And yeah, just to add to all that as well, they've also confirmed that players who buy the standard edition of FIFA 2022 on PS4 or Xbox One will not be able to upgrade to the next-gen versions for free, which I think had been the case on FIFA 21, so they've even scaled back their offer in that sense. Only people who buy the Ultimate Edition on the last gen consoles, which are priced at $89.99 here in the UK, $99. Only those Ultimate Edition purchases will come with what they call dual entitlement, which does allow that cross-generation upgrade to happen for free. But it looks at the moment like if you bought the PS4 version, the standard edition, and then 6 months later you bought a PS5 and you wanted to play the game on your PS5, you would basically have to pay for it again to get the upgrades, to get the version that runs on PS5 the best. So that's not great. That's typically EA. It felt like something
that is some EA bullshit right there. That absolutely is that. That
did feel like something that publishers were kind of doing a bit better on than this, so not ideal from EA, but yeah, hardly unexpected.
No, not ideal at all, and yes, certainly not unexpected, sadly, from EA. It seems madness to me that even if it was a $10 upgrade or something like that from the PS4 version to the PS5 version, they couldn't implement something like that. Instead, you're forcing someone to pay full price for the game again. Am I understanding that correctly? There's no way, literally no way, to upgrade from the standard PS4 or Xbox One version to the next gen version.
It seems that way, yeah. That's what their dual entitlement FAQ says. Yeah,
that's some EA bullshit. I'm calling it right now. Yeah, they need to sort stuff like this out. Yeah, I mean, why do they keep doing this to themselves? This is so dumb. So dumb.
And the platform holders themselves should maybe be starting to put a bit of a foot down on this stuff. I think they do have sway.
It's hard to say that when PlayStation are also charging you for upgrades. It looks like, do you know what I mean? So yeah, maybe they're encouraging the wrong things. Yes, maybe that's a good point. Anyway, Lewis, finishing off as we always do with a couple of shout outs. Shout out number 1, Monster Hunter Stories 2 Wings of Ruin has come out this week. Currently sitting with an 81 on Switch and an 82 on PC. People seem to be generally enjoying the game, which is fantastic. I don't think that it's setting the world on fire necessarily, but I don't think anyone expected it to either. The main complaints about the game that I seem to see are that it was quite easy and that they don't like turn-based combat, which at the same time I'm sort of thinking, well, why are you playing this game? Probably not for you if you don't like that, you know? But long story short, if you're a Monster Hunter fan, you're probably going to like this game. And if you want an easy access into the series, into the wider series, this is a good onboarding point, it would seem. Alright, shout out number 2. F1 2021 has also come out this week, Lewis. Currently sitting with an 84 on PS5, an 88 on Series X, and an 86 on PC. Basically, this game is what it says on the tin, and you're on pretty good hands with Codemasters when it comes to racing games, I would say. It seems as though the new story mode is a welcome addition, and IGN have said that it's the most customizable and ambitious F1 game to date. So, if you're a racing fan, you're a fan of your racing sims, and you like F1, this very much seems as though it is for you. Alright, shout out number 3. Somewhat unbelievably, Lewis, Cyberpunk 2077 has topped the download charts for June on the PlayStation 4. This after only being back on the PlayStation Store from June the 21st onwards, which means that it managed to top the charts in both Europe and North America after only 10 days of sales in June. This despite warnings from both PlayStation and CDPR themselves that the game will play better on PlayStation 4 Pro, which I suppose would contribute to these numbers, but specifically PlayStation 5, let's be honest here, the next gen consoles. Despite that, there's obviously been a huge amount of people still interested in playing this game. Now, I fully expected there to be inrush when the game was available for download again on the PlayStation Store, but fuck's sake, man, like I never expected anything like this, and I never even thought that the interest for people to play this game was there in that manner, that it could push it right to the top of the charts like this after only 10 days as well. Remember that, after only 10 days. This is absolutely bizarre, but good for CDPR, I guess.
I guess, unless it's just people doing what you did and checking it out to see what state it was in, essentially.
Look, I had more curiosity than that, but yeah, that was a part of it, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you can't sniff at that, really. They've got the sales there. There's obviously enough interest in the game. People have been waiting for it to be fixed. I guess that is the thing that concerns me, is have people seen that this has been returned to the store and thought, haha, it is all better now, and then gone and bought it, and it's not really all better. So there might be some people who are still a little bit disappointed by it, but, you know, fair play to CDPR. They've got the sales at long last.
Yeah, I guess so. I would have to still say, having played the game on PlayStation 5 and knowing how it runs on PlayStation 5, I would not want to be running this on anything less than a PS4 Pro, and even at that, I still probably wouldn't recommend playing the game on anything less than a PlayStation 5, and even at that, my recommendation to play it at all is a bit iffy. But I mean, you do you, PlayStation fans. Alright, shout out number 4, Lewis. Ghostwire Tokyo has been delayed. The game was supposed to come out in October, but we haven't heard much from it from quite a while, so to be honest with you, to me anyway, this comes as no surprise at all. The game will now be coming out in early 2022. They didn't outright say on their Twitter statement, but it did seem very clear that this was because of the pandemic. And honestly, I think that that's totally fine, and this might actually end up working out in their favour, because that is a busy window, that October window. You're looking at Far Cry, you're looking at Battlefield, you're looking at Call of Duty, FIFA as well. I mean, dearie me, it's a busy time on the run up to Christmas, so I think moving it might actually have been for the best overall anyway. And keeping your staff safe is obviously vastly more important than hitting some arbitrary deadline, so take your time, make the best game that you can, and we'll still be here when you release it. And final shout out, number 5, Lewis. The now infamous Abandoned app can be preloaded from July the 29th on PS5. Following this, the first trailer will be available on August the 10th. Now, obviously conspiracy theories around Abandoned and around Blue Box have run absolutely wild. Everyone seems to think that Kojima could be involved with this, or that it's Silent Hill, or both, and I just don't think either of them are true, and I think that this guy's got himself in a real mess over some bad marketing decisions around his Twitter account, frankly. I really hope that whatever he shows off is good and worth showing off and worth getting us excited about this app for, because if it's not, the backlash could be real bad, and I genuinely fear for that for him.
Yeah, I really hope there isn't any kind of backlash, no matter what this is, no matter how good or bad it looks, no matter if...
Oh yeah, to be clear, this guy does not deserve any backlash or any ill will at all. He's a man who's made a couple of bad decisions, but that is it.
Yeah, potentially he's made some bad decisions. Potentially he is actually Hideo Kojima. I don't really think that. Just a caveat. But, you know, I mean, what I'm hoping for really is some reason that they need this trailer app. I want to know what that's all about, and, you know, if this is something that we can look forward to with other PlayStation games in future. I think where some of the backlash could come is if this is literally just something that could have been put on YouTube as a trailer. You know, presumably it's going to be playable. Presumably there's going to be something more to it than just a demo. So let's see what that is. I'm excited for it for those reasons, as well as the potential crazy payoff on the whole abandoned saga.
No, I have to admit, I am also intrigued to see what this trailer app is as well, to be completely honest with you. And yeah, it will have to be playable or else the backlash is going to be harsh. I think I really do. But yeah, I guess wait and see. Not long to wait now. August 10th, I guess. Alright, Liz, time for a beer and then we'll be back with Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is: are live services the future of single player games, Lewis?
It is indeed, Mark. Yeah, so obviously this is coming off the back of the Assassin's Creed Infinity news and also those rumours about GTA 6 that we discussed last week and that we mentioned earlier. Basically, this idea that single-player games might be starting to move towards a more live service model. And for anyone that doesn't know what that means exactly, I guess we're basically talking about evolving content, you know, drops of new stories, new raids to do, new missions to take on, maybe maps that evolve and change over time, that kind of thing, and the sort of thing that we've seen in, most notably I guess, in Fortnite, but also you've seen it in Destiny and in all sorts of games. It's become the dominant thing, particularly in multiplayer games, I think it is fair to say.
Indeed.
We did touch on some of this a little bit earlier, but I think it's a really interesting concept, this move of single player games. I mean, when you think about something like Assassin's Creed, it's, you know, a big historic franchise now in gaming, and they could be really pushing the boat out here and doing something a bit different. And so we just kind of wanted to talk to you about what you think of this, how you think single player games can operate in the live service kind of space. Should they? Does it work? Is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? And maybe like throw out some other franchises that could follow Assassin's Creed's lead here and do something quite similar. So starting off, just to ask you, Mark, what you think about this. Multiplayer live service games generally rely on replayability and the grind that you can do, and that you can jump in with different friends at different points, and that's how you keep people engaged. But how do single player games operate in a live service model? What do you think this is going to look like?
It's interesting. I'm not entirely sure, because I would have thought that, for example, GTA 6, if we're talking about it being a service type game, I would have thought that it would have followed much more in line with GTA Online rather than GTA 5, you know? But Assassin's Creed is a slightly different beast, I suppose, which is much more single player focused. So how is that going to look? I'm not entirely sure. I mean, don't get me wrong. What was it? Assassin's Creed, was it Syndicate, where you worked within like a team and there was like online components to it?
Possibly, yeah.
I can maybe see them trying to do something like that, but on like a much bigger scale, it sounds like, obviously, you know. How is that actually going to look in terms of single player? I'm really not sure, to be honest. I'm really not sure, because if they're claiming that it is going to be still a single player game, but it's going to have online components, I mean, these things very, very rarely work. And in actual fact, off the top of my head, I can't really think of any examples of it working. I mean, the latest one was Outriders, right? I mean, that came out and they were claiming, oh, yeah, you can definitely play this single player. And as it transpired, it was a significantly worse experience trying to play a single player than it was with friends. It was obviously designed with that in mind, which is fine. So just say that, you know? But honestly, the answer to your question, Lewis, is I sort of don't know. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? To be honest, it's neither. It's neither yet. I mean, it could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing, depending on the game, depending on how they choose to implement that. I think that what really a service game is trying to do is, as you were talking about with Origins, is like trying to provide like a long tail, do you know what I mean? But not even within the context of a game, like within the context of a decade. They want Assassin's Creed Infinity to still be around and for people to still be engaging with it and for people to still be coming back for new content for years and years and years and years and years. How do they do that without the multiplayer element? Because the multiplayer lends itself so easily to that. And if they aren't going down this multiplayer line, which to be honest with you, I sort of suspect that they are, but if they aren't, unless you're doing pretty frequent content drops, I'm not really sure how that is going to translate to a service. Ubisoft could surprise me there, but I suppose the answer to my question is I don't know on both counts.
That's fair enough. I mean, you're not employed by Ubisoft here to come up with this stuff, but I guess to me, like, to quickly throw out some thoughts on what this might mean and how it could work in a single player context, I'm sort of imagining, and sticking with Assassin's Creed because it's the one that we kind of know a bit about, if it does do this thing of using the Animus as their kind of hub, essentially, I could see them essentially treating the in-game content as like each area, and I'm going to pretend as well that Origins, Odyssey and Valhalla are already part of this, right? And so maybe each game already exists in quite a small way within your base game, your launcher, which may well be free to play, right? But then over time, you know, as you're exploring Greece, Ubisoft each month will add in a new raid where you can go and earn some new piece of gear that you couldn't get before. They'll drop in a new story mission into Valhalla that you can go and do. They'll add some challenges or some mercenaries or something to Origins, and you can go about doing that. And then, you know, every 6 months or every year, like the big Destiny content drops you get, where you get a big new season and it's kind of a big significant thing, that's when they'll sort of add a new map. So you'll now get like Turkey added to it, or, you know, North Africa, or whatever the next map is going to be. That's kind of how I imagine it would work. I guess essentially it's sort of like an RPG, a massive RPG in the way that Assassin's Creed currently is, but that has a rolling content plan to it that is more frequent than what Assassin's Creed's already doing. But I guess, Mark, the reason that I'm kind of saying, like, is this a good thing or a bad thing, is that the thing that separates all of this, well, two things separate all of this, is story and money. And the thing that worries me about this whole idea is that the idea of adding new story stuff pretty frequently could be really exciting, and I think that any game that tries to put story content out more frequently can use its existing big maps, but can just drop a character in who will add a new bit of plot line and you can go and do some stuff. That could be really good, but can you do that justice on a typical live service game roadmap? Like, how quickly you have to put that stuff out? And the flip side of that, Mark, is that live service games are basically all about monetizing the game for as long as possible.
Why, yes, they are, Lewis.
And it worries me a bit that something like Assassin's Creed would then maybe go down the route of going like, I mean, paying for big content drops is fair enough, but if it starts to be like, you're going to grind so that you don't have to pay for this shield or this outfit, and it becomes a real big time and money investment in that way, I think that could become quite problematic.
Well, yeah, and Ubisoft have history here, frankly,
Yep.
with Assassin's Creed having their XP booster where you could pay an extra tenner and you just get through the game faster, which really felt cheap, really, didn't it? It felt like a bad way to get through the game. It felt like a bad way to monetize it, to extend that lifeline, rather than giving you additional content. It's just like, oh, we've cut the grind in half for the content that you already have. That's bullshit, frankly. I'm just going to say that. So I hope that they do not go down that road. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, if this goes online and it goes service, and particularly if it goes free to play, then yes, categorically, yes, it will have microtransactions. There will be ways to continually get money out of the players. You know what I mean? Now, we've seen that done well and we've seen that done badly. It all depends on how that's handled, I suppose. But yeah, if we're still looking at this from the perspective of a single player game, which again, I really sort of don't suspect that Infinity is going to be. I think that it will be multiplayer, to be completely honest. But if we are pretending that this will be a single player game, I think that that's more difficult because a lot of it is sort of prestige items that you're sort of going for. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of rare items so that your character can look cool, and so that when you enter a battlefield, people go, oh, he's got the fancy dancy super shield, he must be good, or whatever, you know. It's vanity items. I mean, a lot of it is loose.
It totally is.
A lot of it is aesthetic. And in a single player game, that doesn't fucking matter.
But it does. I mean, some people are doing that in, you know, Assassin's Creed Odyssey and stuff already. You know, it's, I guess when you bring in the kind of Twitch components and stuff.
I mean, to bring in that sort of thing, I mean, it's not it doesn't matter as much, as what I will say. It doesn't matter as much.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And I do wonder, even if it is a broadly single-player game, whether there would be, hub cities where you could meet up with other assassins or something like that, that could be some blend of the two things so that your outfits and that do start to matter. I guess the thing to extend all this, you can imagine, particularly if it is free-to-play and it is a big launch of this game, you can imagine that it will prove to be financially fairly successful.
Well,
and then
Ubisoft has history there as well of not being financially successful with some of their online ventures, I do have to say, but yeah, okay.
Fair enough, but given the Assassin's Creed name, a lot of people are going to try this, particularly if it is free to play at the start.
Yeah, I'm being slightly facetious here. This will be huge when it first kicks off.
And again, I think if they announce that as Assassin's Creed Infinity is North America, the UK, and Northern Europe as your baseline map or whatever, that is going to be pretty insane. But I just wonder, if they're successful, does this bleed out into other publishers? Do we start to see other publishers, I guess particularly the problematic ones like EA especially?
EA will be on this like fucking hotcakes if this happens. Absolutely. It's the nature of video game development. It's the nature of most creative fields. If something's working, then everyone's going to want a slice of that pie. Everybody's going to want in on that action. You know what I mean? We've seen it happen with everything from auto battlers to fucking battle royale. It happens all the time. So yes, if this will bleed in isn't really a question for me. If this is successful, this will happen for numerous franchises. It will happen.
Well, I want to throw two EA franchises at you then, because I think there are some areas where this general idea of having single-player live service games where content that can be added, story content, new collectibles, new cosmetics, all that stuff that EA currently publishes, and those would be, to me, Mark, the next Mass Effect game could definitely follow into this kind of model.
Fuck me. That's a very good one list. I like that a lot. Well, I don't like it. I would hate it if that were the case, but it makes sense for the franchise, yeah.
And the other one, I guess in a similar vein, is Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. And whether or not you could just add content to those existing worlds, and then, every 9 months you go, here's our big X planet expansion, and that's where we're going to take all the gameplay to this new space, and it's going to be a whole new map, and you're going to find loads of stuff there. I can see that working quite well with certain types of games. I was also thinking about things like the Outer Worlds and Fallout, the Elder Scrolls games. Big RPGs can really sustain that model, I think.
Ultimately I think what we've just discovered there is that any big RPG could sustain this model. Any existing one. I think the two that you mentioned there, Mass Effect and Star Wars, and let's face it, EA have got a history with Star Wars on this front. Yeah, they make a huge amount of sense. They make a huge amount of sense to me. They make a huge amount of sense within this theoretical model that we're talking about here. Keeping in mind that this is all speculation at this point. But yes, if what we're talking about does come to fruition and Ubisoft successfully take this single player game online in the capacity that we're talking about, then a lot of those franchises I think could easily end up there as well if it is successful. I think that particularly EA, who again would just at the drop of a hat would have that going, do you know what I mean? Would just be like, what's the new hotness? This thing? Alright, well, we need one right now.
Is there money to be made?
What we got? Mass Effect. Let's go. Yeah, exactly.
And I do think that is the one encouraging thing about Ubisoft's version of this as we see it at the moment, is that they have put two enormous teams into this.
Arguably their two biggest teams. These are two teams that make the Assassin's Creed games, you know what I mean, on and off the Quebec and Montreal studios. I don't know the ins and outs of Ubisoft's structure, but I believe that they have a big studio in Paris as well. But beyond that, I think Montreal is the next biggest, and Quebec's probably the next biggest after that. So this is two huge studios working together on this project.
Yeah, and so you can imagine that they're going to hand off content the way that they currently hand off games, and so I think that is how this needs to work, if it is to work as a single-player live service game, because you need to keep a fairly constant, or at least a regular enough update cycle, and that means you need big enough teams working on it to produce that stuff, and that would worry me about some of the other publishers getting involved here and maybe making teams crunch, or maybe not putting enough resources into it to make it work properly, and ending up with the classic multiplayer dead game live service thing of there's just nothing to do. That's what we saw with Avengers quite quickly. It was just there's nothing really to do here after you've been playing it for a couple of hours. That feels to me like one of the big hurdles here.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. One thing that we were sort of touching on as well when we were talking about this in the news was if these two big studios that made the most recent Assassin's Creed games are working solely on this project, who's making the next Assassin's Creed? And does that mean that this is just Assassin's Creed's future? This online version of the game just will be what Assassin's Creed is from now on, you know?
I totally can imagine that will be the case, yeah. Whether other publishers end up doing the same thing, whether we start to see that kind of consolidation of the single player space that I really hope we don't see. I mean, one of the other games that I had thought about in this model, Mark, and it will never happen, I pray that it will never happen, is God of War.
I mean, it could happen with God of War. I mean, in that the game could support that structure. Whether or not PlayStation would do that is slightly more debatable, although with the acquisitions that we're currently seeing, we know that PlayStation are starting to diversify. I would have thought that they wouldn't do it with God of War or The Last of Us, again, another game that could probably sustain something like that. But maybe as like a spin-off, maybe we aren't following the Ellie storyline, maybe there's someone else out there that we're following instead. But the world of The Last of Us certainly supports that categorically. I wouldn't say that God of War was terribly likely, but would PlayStation jump on the bandwagon? I think that they're maybe slightly less likely. Same with Xbox. I mean, the platform holders tend not to jump on the bandwagons in quite the same way, because we didn't see PlayStation like go down the Battle Royale route or anything like that. No. And although we're seeing Xbox do that with Halo, at the end of the day, like if you now launched a Halo game that didn't have a Battle Royale mode, it would almost feel missing. That totally makes sense with that. But as well, this is a long time later than the Battle Royale craze as well. So totally. I don't think the platform holders do that in quite the same way, but in terms of like third party, like Activision, for example, they would have one in a fucking heartbeat as well. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, yeah, you make an interesting point there, because Xbox does have a decent number of live service games when you think about things like Sea of Thieves and stuff, but they all tend to be in that multiplayer or the soft single into multiplayer kind of zone. Indeed,
but they do now have a hell of a lot of RPGs now that they have Bethesda.
Exactly. With something like God of War, I can just see it, a decade from now, if the model is proven and if the technology means that, downloads of the new content and all of that can happen really rapidly, I could see it happening, because you look at God of War as it currently exists and you think, well, you could just add the other realms that, that weren't really explored.
Absolutely.
And you could add, you could go back to one of the realms that we've already been in, but there's just been some state change to it all, or there's, more of the Valkyries or whatever. And if little hints that were within God of War of its future being set in other traditions, in ancient Egypt or that kind of thing, that there was like a little nod to some of that within some of the in-game lore in God of War. You could imagine, similarly, Assassin's Creed, that down the line you're just playing Kratos and you're exploring all sorts of different places, so who knows. I think that, like, you're right, that PlayStation would hold off on this kind of thing until it's like the dominant thing that is happening in games, and then
the platform holders aren't so quick to that sort of thing, do you know what I mean, whereas third parties are extremely quick to that sort of thing. So anyway, Lewis, I think we'll have to call it a day there. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerSToo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, 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 really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show, and thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. It genuinely means a huge amount to us, and it really does help the show. I know I say it twice a week, every week, but it does not become less important on a weekly basis. So just thank you again. It does genuinely mean a huge amount to us. I'd like to remind everyone that our play-along game for this month is Florence, the best mobile game Mark has ever played. Again, I think that it cost £3 or something like that, which is absolutely nothing. You'd be lucky to get a Starbucks coffee for that. The game isn't very long at all. It's about an hour, maybe even less, but it is a superb experience, and everyone should play along with us because it takes no time and very little money to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. A great little game, well worth the very small amount of time it will take you to get through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Quite frankly, if I could give the developer more money for that game, I would. So there you go. It is very, very good indeed. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.